Does the Lean Six Sigma program, and obviously, I don't understand the methodology and the technical aspects of the Lean Six Sigma. Has this been used elsewhere? And if so, to what degree of success? Other agencies, other departments?
Outside of DTSC, this is a process that is used quite a bit in
You said Fortune 500
in
companies.
Fortune 500 companies, and the governor's office has a grant program where departments that have really challenged processes are given training in understanding and using these tools, because this isn't a simple analysis. It does require training. So a number of departments in the state have sent staff for this training. We've done a number of these projects now. The one we did on the technical part of the review for permits was one of them. We've also recently completed one on the process that's referred to as notice of deficiency. And this is another area that there's a lot of public concern about. The department issues a notice of deficiency to a facility when they've put in an application and the application doesn't have all the information we need in order to evaluate it. Obviously, the department has to issue a good notice of deficiency for the facility to know what it is it has to give us. And then the facility has to give it to us. The process by which this has been done didn't really have any clear guidance to staff on what those notices of deficiency needed to look like and how we would work to get the information we need. And so what we've done is really drilled down on that process. We've completed that review, and now I believe we will be able to get the information we need with one or two notices of deficiency, and I'm prepared to commit that we will resolve the ambiguity about whether the department should ever issue a third notice of deficiency and say we're just not going to go beyond 3.
So the allegations or the accusations of an ad hoc application with regards to the permitting process is no longer now with the Lean Six Sigma system that you have.
That transformation is underway, I would say. We are going element by element and taking each part of the decision-making process, setting criteria and standards, and improving it. It will be the end of the year before we've gotten through the entire process, because it was a 2-year project to get that done, and some of the pieces will involve rulemaking, and rulemaking has its own time frame associated with it. I can commit to moving forward to initiate that rulemaking, but it does take time to get the rulemaking done.
Fair enough. So we know, so it's clear, you use the word trajectory. So the 2 years is the average permitting time frame. That is a goal.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the trajectory, that's the projection.
Yes.
We're not there.
We are not there.
Okay, I just want to be very clear. We're not there right now with the Lean Six Sigma application. Your projected goal, the goal is different, as we know. Goals are different than where we're at today and where we want to be tomorrow. Where you want to be is 2 years.
2 years for 90% of permits.
For 90% of permits. Understanding a lot of these other facilities are very complex in nature, and they'll take a lot more time. So we're talking 2 years goal, and you correct me where I'm wrong. The trajectory of the department is to have 90% of the cases before you for permits to be decided, either yay or nay, within a 2-year time frame, or average.
The average time frame per permit will be 2 years.
The average per permit, okay, average, okay.
So
now we're not talking about maximum 2 years, we're talking about average.
Right.
Okay, that's different. Okay. So I don't know the averages, you know, I'm not a mathematician. I don't know if that's between 1 and 3.5 years or 3 point, depending on the volume of the cases that are before you, that averages out, which is important to note. It's not maximum within 24 months your case will be decided on. We're talking about average, 2 years.
I expect that 90% of the permits before us will be decided within a 2-year period for
Okay.
each of those permits.
Okay,
But I want to
that's
make,
different than
there's one distinction I want to make.
Okay.
When I say the permits that are before us, I do mean as a permit comes in the door, we receive the application, and I expect that 90% of the applications we receive, we will take action on in 2 years. We have a backlog, and we have a schedule for clearing out the backlog. Coincidentally, the schedule for clearing out that backlog is also 2 years. So there are a total of 24 permits that we started last year, and we will be done with those 2 years from now. That's what we committed to when we requested the budget augmentation a year ago to do that, and we are on track to meet that target.
So let me go, and I want to get your subjective opinion, your thoughts as the leader of DTSC. And then we'll go into some questions of the members, and we're going to come back around again. What happened? What happened at DTSC that it had fallen so low that it can be said it was the head of an agency, perhaps it has been, that was the source of the problem, but it was so embedded within the culture from top to bottom or bottom to top, you know? And maybe you don't share that opinion. That's from an outsider's view, dealing with constituents and others being at the end result of the lack of transparency and accountability within the department itself. Give us your full assessment. What happened to DTSC, and how did it fall so low?
I think there are a number of things that have contributed.
And be mindful of one thing, you know, because, you know, what we're looking for is not for apologists, not for folks who are going to be revisionists of history, but just be straight.
Yeah. I do think there are a number of things that have happened over the years. As you pointed out, there have been quite a few directors. I'm not going to try to second guess the decisions made by any of my predecessors, but I can say that that number of directors in that time period, all of whom had different ideas about what success looks like and how the department ought to carry out its mission, I think it's created some confusion among the staff. And beyond confusion, it has left people unwilling to have opinions that they put forward and are willing to stand by because they don't know how that's going to be received, and they don't know if the direction's going to change soon, and then they're on the wrong side of things. So there's an important culture process that you alluded to where I have to make connections with the staff in the organization and build the relationships to give them the confidence that they can rely on me not only today, but in the future, and that we're going to put in place clear direction that they can follow. So I'm trying to eliminate the confusion. I also think it's human nature to want to avoid unpleasantness. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do has to address unpleasantness head on. We're not talking about clean air. We're not talking about clean water. We're talking about hazardous waste and contaminated sites. And this is something people are afraid of. This is something people have reason to be afraid of. It's something people get very angry about. It's something people feel threatened by, and they get very passionate about it. And I think over the years, the staff, sort of like a sea anemone in the water, has withdrawn its tentacles for fear of the anger that's out there. I think a lot of the staff are still working hard to try to do the right thing to the extent that they believe they know what that is, but they're not really willing to talk about it. And that's contributed to a lack of understanding outside the department about what we're doing inside and why we're doing it. That's another thing I'm working hard to fix. The lack of standards that you and others have pointed to so many times in terms of clear performance standards also has harmed the department. I think the lack of those standards has made it difficult for staff to really understand what the target is they're shooting for in terms of the job they're supposed to do and the protection they're required to guarantee to the public. It's also made it hard for the public to have confidence in the decisions we make because they don't know what the standards are and they don't see how the decisions are made. So I'm also working on getting those clear standards in place in a durable, very public way, and opening up the communication about the process, about how we approach not just the setting of the standards, but the implementation of them going forward.
A few observations. And in this case, the old adage, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Obviously, there's a leadership issue. Those who have been at the helm of this agency. I remember I interviewed your predecessor, Debbie Raphael, very competent person, very intelligent. Her track record, her history demonstrated that she cared about these communities. It was clear. Her track record demonstrated it in the past. She inherited, obviously, an agency that was too much for her to control. We wish her the very best in her new endeavor in San Francisco. The leadership issue. 10 different directors, not in the past century, 100 years, you know, averaging, you know, one, you know, every decade, but 10 different directors in 10 years says that there's something that's so beyond leadership, and what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the culture? Is it the department itself that is swallowing up also to the directors, or a combination thereof? Because obviously, as you stated, hazardous waste, contaminated sites, really, really harmful, really dangerous chemicals in communities. So obviously, this department is a very, very important department. So we're talking about the health, you know, of the surrounding communities, senior citizens, young children. And as I stated earlier, these facilities for zoning purposes, for political purposes, you know, have been zoned in the lowest income neighborhoods throughout the state of California. So the staff members, and I'm sure there's wonderful people, you know, at DTSC, the lack of the avoidance of conflict, the fear because of the wrath of community members, community activists, nonprofit agencies, advocates, you know, elected officials themselves who represent these constituents, that they have recoiled for fear of the wrath of electeds and community members and so forth. And I'm not asking you to justify or rationalize, because this is, again, you know, is very perplexing for us, given the fact that, again, we're not dealing with simple widgets, but we're dealing with some extremely dangerous and harmful, you know, chemicals that have seeped into groundwater and that children have breathed into their own lungs. So I think I can speak for this committee that we're very, very perplexed still nonetheless of the attitude, the culture, the behavior of the department as a whole, obviously the leaders themselves. But what it does, it gives us an insight that is beyond the leadership issue. Because someone doesn't show up on an average of a year, let's say average 10 years, 10 years, 10 directors, average 1 year, and say, we're out of here. And maybe it's a combination of both leadership and the culture of the institution itself, but it's something that's much more deeply embedded. Again, either you're a glutton for punishment, Ms. Lee, because obviously you're walking into this very eyes wide open on this issue, or you truly believe in yourself that you can actually make things right. There's a lot of detractors, obviously, in the community throughout the state of California. I probably have a lot of detractors who are my constituents. We'll find out when we go to the support in opposition. But we're going to go to questions and answers from the members of the Rules Committee, and then we'll come back around again. If Ms. Mitchell, we'll go to Senator Holly Mitchell from Los Angeles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pro Tem. Thank you for the time we spent together. As I listened to the Pro Tem's last question, I think it really is important, and I think we spent a lot of time in this committee digging deeply into kind of performance metrics of various department heads, but it really is a matter of executive management. And to help develop and guide organizational culture shift takes time. And time is not on your side at this point. As the Pro Tem said, you are leading a department unlike many state departments where constituents don't have a clue exist and don't impact public health and safety in terms of the fundamental work you do. They're in a completely different world than you are. So as in the context of executive management, recognizing that you clearly have culture work to do within the organization, how are you going to manage that is really my fundamental question. And then I'll come back to some specifics with regard to Exide and your management of that, pardon the pun, hot mess. But executive management and how you're going to lead this culture shift.
Thank you for the question, Senator. As I alluded to earlier, I believe that I have to forge the relationships with staff just as I have to forge the relationships outside the department. To do that, I immediately started traveling to our regional offices. We have 8 regional offices, and I visited all of them in the first 6 weeks that I was on the job, and 2 of those 6 weeks spanned the winter holiday season. So I really was on the road a lot, and I've been going back around to the offices as well. So the first time I went down, we did big meetings. People got to just ask me all the questions they wanted to ask me, get to know me and my style. Then I've gone back and taken them to work on specific things together. So I've been out on inspections with field inspection staff. I've sat down and worked on specific issues around permits with permitting staff. I've worked on cleanup site questions with my cleanup staff. I've been in my labs and talked with the folks in the labs about the work they're doing there. This is part of getting them comfortable with me, getting them to see how interested I am in the work we do together, because I don't simply tell them go off and do the work. This is our work. It's our department. It's our mission. And I'm engaged in it.
And I'm clear based on some of the comments the Pro Tem made about the organization, and it can't just be the leadership, churn. Are you clear that your whole organization has a common understanding of the vision?
We're working on that.
Okay.
That is exactly what we're working on. I've brought on some additional new leadership. I mentioned Ana Mascareñas, who just started with us a couple weeks ago. We also have our new deputy director over our hazardous waste management program, who I introduced, Elise Rothschild. We have a new division chief over permitting, a new division chief over enforcement. We are hoping we will shortly have a new chief inspector or investigator in our Office of Criminal Investigation. I have a new division chief over a portion of my cleanup program, and we're seeking a new deputy director over the cleanup program. So we've got some new leadership coming in. Some of the division chief level positions I've referenced are promotions from within, where people have shown that they really have the commitment to the vision, the work ethic that we want, and the willingness to hold themselves and their staff accountable. I want to be held accountable, I hold my team accountable, and my team needs to extend all the way down. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, this is an iterative process. It isn't a one-shot deal when a new leader comes in. It's working slowly through the organization and through the culture so that people see where we're going and know that we're going there together.
And that they're clear that you have a new, different expectation in terms of performance. And again, creating this culture shift. So the notion of fear around duties is not a healthy environment, nor does it reflect well on Californians who have to live with the work that's done. Can we move on to Exide?
We can. I would just like to add one thing, and that is the thing I message most with my staff when I meet with them is I will always ask you, have we done the best we can do, given the constraints we're operating under? Have we done the best we can do? And if we haven't, we're going to go back and do it again.
Speaking of constraints that you're operating under, I want to talk a little bit about Exide in the context of what's in your lane, not what you've been able to do since you arrived. I've seen letters and expressed concerns from a variety of advocacy groups, and I'm not certain that all of the expectations are doable, are affordable, are really, frankly, in your lane, in your scope of work. And so I think it's important for you to share with us and for the record what actions you took with regard to Exide, and if you can go a little bit into what we can expect to come next, because it feels to be almost like the perfect storm. A company that has filed bankruptcy, we expect to fund, critical cleanup. That's a long-term commitment. So can you talk to us about what's the status of their bankruptcy and what's the contingency plan if they can't pay for the cleanup, and how the department will hold Exide accountable, we talked about accountability, for their cleanup?
Thank you also for this question. Exide is a very widely known facility, and even though I am not from Southern California, and even though I was not working in the hazardous waste world before I took this job, I knew about Exide. So I knew coming in that this was something I was going to have to address, and I was going to have to address it quickly, head on. I started on December 1st. In December, I stepped up our oversight at the facility. I also made sure we got the work started on the residential cleanups that we had funding in place to get the cleanups done on. In January, we did an investigation of the containment building, which is one of the central parts of that facility, and it's responsible for keeping the toxic stuff in, making sure it doesn't get out into the environment. We had concerns about its performance. I made them test. I made them retest. They tried to say there was nothing wrong with the building. They intended to put a new concrete floor in that building and reopen it in March. In February, we had the testing data that showed that the building was not working properly. It was not containing the waste. When we had that evidence, I moved quickly and informed them I would be issuing a notice of intent to deny their permit. I did that knowing that that would put them into closure. I did that knowing that they might then go into liquidation. At that time, they asked me if I would withhold the letter that I had at that meeting to give them so that they could inform their creditors in the hope that it wouldn't cause liquidation. And I agreed to work with them in order to do my very best to make sure Exide paid for its closure and cleanup.
Because liquidation is
Exactly.
compromised.
If they had
ability.
liquidated, there would have been no money for the closure and the cleanup. And I wanted to try to secure that money. I notified them on February 26th. We began immediately restructuring how they would pay for closure and the terms under which they would be closing. We had that agreement worked out in the second week of March. It's encompassed in an order that we issued to Exide that I signed on the morning of March 12th. Also in March, the U.S. Attorney let us know Exide had just approached them to discuss closing the facility and signing a non-prosecution agreement. That non-prosecution agreement was approved by Exide's Board of Directors at the same meeting on March 11th where they accepted the terms of our order for the closure of their plant.
Now, Exide approaching the AG, was that a part of their liquidation strategy as well?
I do not know, but I would have to assume so, and I should clarify for the record, it's the U.S. Attorney, not the Attorney General.
I'm sorry. You probably said that, and so it seems to me that could have been a part of their
It would be reasonable to conclude that, but I do not know that for a fact. So both the non-prosecution agreement and our order were approved by Exide's Board of Directors at its meeting on March 11th. And on March 12th, I signed that order. Exide submitted those to the bankruptcy court. The court accepted those at the end of March. And then Exide emerged from Chapter 11. So they are no longer in bankruptcy. They have been restructured. They gave us formal notice that they were closing the facility in April, as required under our order. In April, we also held a community meeting to inform the community that what was going to be happening with the closure process. I should point out that that non-prosecution agreement that Exide signed with the U.S. Attorney does require them to follow our order and to bring their closure and cleanup process forward pursuant to and in compliance with the plans that we approve for them, including paying for it. So that acts now as a federal backstop to all of the tools we have to hold Exide accountable. We've met with the community, as I said, in April to talk about the closure. In May, we also had meetings to inform them about additional soil sampling that was being done in an expanded area around the facility, looking at contamination patterns. We also had a community meeting to begin a community advisory group for Exide's closure and cleanup process. This advisory group has representation from a number of community residents and advocates. We also invited the participation and partnership of other co-regulators, including the South Coast Air Quality Management District, the LA County Department of Public Health, the City of Vernon-Koupa, and US EPA. These are our partners in making sure that things are done properly going forward, and we want to have them at the table as partners, not someone we check in with from time to time. That advisory group is now set up and is meeting monthly. It has a community co-chair as well. We have also funded a technical advisor to support the community as they review and give input into the closure plan and the cleanup process, because we want them to feel fully empowered to advise us as we make decisions about Exide's closure and cleanup. We are in the midst of the selection process for the technical advisor. What we did was we went out and solicited from other agencies that have provided this service the names of qualified technical advisors, and people also self-nominated, and some community groups also recommended folks. We collected statements of qualification from them and have been supporting a subcommittee of the community advisory group so the community can pick its own technical advisor from that list. So this is the advisor they want, that they will be comfortable with, and we expect that that selection will be complete by the 23rd of July, which is our next monthly meeting of the advisory group. I attend all the meetings of the advisory group personally, and I also expect that my co-regulators will continue to personally attend.
And what's the role of the advisory group? What's their power? What's their function?
We bring all of the pieces of the closure process, the cleanup process that we have to take into account and make decisions on. We share those with the advisory group. They give us their thoughts, questions, concerns about those so that that can shape how we approve the closure plan, what it requires. We had extensive conversations at the last advisory group meeting about truck routes, concerns about truck routes in the community, about whether the trucks they were seeing were trucks taking material from Exide or other trucks. Is there a way to identify them? Is there a better way to enforce the trucks using those truck routes? This was a really good discussion for us, and I've directed my staff to work on that issue to find better ways to hold Exide accountable for that piece of the closure process. There are other pieces that we will be evaluating with the advisory group. They have the ability to have input into the entire process.